3:18 a.m., Route 27 Post Office dock, loading bay 7. Surveillance footage shows veteran mail truck driver Eddie Morales unlocking a heavy steel mail sack labeled Priority Cash, $10,600,000. The timestamp glows in the corner, 3:18:42. Eddie's movements are practiced, efficient, calm. He's done this hundreds of times before. Inside the reinforced sacks are bundles of unmarked bills headed for dozens of bank branches across 3 counties. Daily cash reserves, ATM refills, payroll deposits. In under 5 minutes, the sacks are empty. Eddie seals them back up with fresh security tags, loads them into his mail truck, and makes his scheduled departure. The truck disappears into the pre-dawn darkness, following Route 27 toward the first bank on a 150-mile delivery loop. He delivered mail for 20 years, but this night he delivered himself a fortune. Before I walk you through the full story, I just have a small favor to ask. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and let me know in the comments. What city are you watching from? It's always amazing to see how far this audience is reaching. Monday morning, 6:30 a.m., Route 27 Post Office. Eddie Morales pulled his Honda Civic into the employee parking lot, grabbed his thermos of black coffee, and walked through the same entrance he'd used for 2 decades. At 44, Eddie was one of the most reliable drivers in the district. He greeted the same coworkers, loaded the same types of mail sacks, and signed the same delivery manifests. His supervisor, Janet Walsh, barely looked up from her clipboard when Eddie checked in. "Morning, Eddie. Route 27 as usual. You've got 3 cash runs this week, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday." Eddie nodded and collected his keys. Cash runs were routine but required extra documentation. Banks needed their reserves delivered on precise schedules, and any delays triggered immediate security protocols. Eddie had never been late for a cash run in 20 years. He loaded his truck with standard mail, letters, packages, business deliveries, and began his route through the suburbs and rural areas outside Detroit. His neighbors waved from their driveways. Shop owners saved their coffee for his arrival. Eddie was a reliable face on Route 27, and his neighbors never imagined he held the key to millions in his hands every week. But Eddie had problems. Big problems. His 12-year-old son Miguel had been diagnosed with leukemia 8 months earlier. The chemotherapy treatments cost $8,000 per month, and Eddie's insurance covered only 60%. His ex-wife Carmen was demanding increased alimony payments to help with Miguel's care, but Eddie was already borrowing against his mortgage to pay the medical bills. The mortgage on Eddie's modest 2-bedroom house was 3 months behind. The bank had sent foreclosure warnings. Eddie's savings account held $247. His credit cards were maxed out. He made $38,000 a year delivering mail while handling millions in cash every week. Eddie watched other people's money move through the postal system like water through pipes. Businesses shipped cash deposits, banks transferred reserves, and government agencies moved funds between facilities. On a typical Tuesday, Eddie's truck carried over $10 million in various forms of currency. He was surrounded by wealth he could never touch, until he realized that maybe he could. Eddie had been handling cash deliveries for 5 years. He knew every security protocol, every documentation requirement, every checkpoint along the route. The system was designed to prevent external theft, not internal manipulation. The post office contracted with regional banks to provide secure cash transport twice weekly. Instead of expensive armored cars, they used modified mail trucks with reinforced compartments and tracking systems. The service was cheaper than private security companies and nearly as secure. The cash shipments followed a rigid schedule. Every Tuesday and Friday at midnight, Eddie loaded specially marked mail sacks containing currency bundles. The sacks were sealed with tamper-evident tags and secured with analog locks. Each sack contained between $500,000 and $1.2 million, depending on the destination bank's needs. Eddie's route covered 10 bank branches on a 150-mile loop through 3 counties. He made deliveries between 4 a.m. and 8 a.m. when the banks were closed, but security staff were present to receive shipments. The process was simple. Unlock the sack, verify the contents with bank personnel, obtain signatures, and move to the next location. Security measures included GPS tracking of the truck, radio check-ins every hour, and analog seals on each sack that would show evidence of tampering. But there were no interior cameras in the truck, no escorts after the first 2 stops, and no real-time monitoring of the cash itself. Eddie began studying the vulnerabilities. The GPS tracker could be temporarily disabled during routine maintenance. The analog seals could be duplicated with the right materials. The sacks could be opened and resealed without detection if done carefully. Most importantly, the banks only verified the total number of bundles, not the contents of each bundle. If Eddie replaced cash bundles with newspaper cut to the same size and weight, the discrepancy wouldn't be discovered until the bank opened for business hours, giving him a 5-hour head start. The opportunity was there. Eddie just needed the courage to take it. Eddie spent 2 weeks planning every detail. He studied the route timing, security protocols, and documentation requirements. He identified the optimal point for the theft and prepared his escape strategy. The target was the Friday cash run, which carried the highest dollar amounts due to weekend ATM refill requirements. The total shipment typically exceeded $10 million across all 10 bank branches. Eddie's plan had 4 phases: preparation, execution, escape, and laundering. Eddie befriended Tommy Rodriguez, the night shift mechanic who maintained the mail trucks. Tommy was a good guy struggling with his own financial problems. 2 kids, expensive diabetes medication for his wife, and student loans from a trade school. Eddie offered to help Tommy with small tasks and brought him coffee during the long overnight shifts. Through casual conversation, Eddie learned that Tommy routinely disabled GPS trackers for maintenance diagnostics that lasted 10 to 15 minutes. The procedure was logged but not closely monitored. Eddie arranged to have his truck inspected during the optimal window. Eddie also studied the analog seals used on cash sacks. They were standard postal security devices with unique serial numbers and tamper-evident features. Eddie practiced duplicating them using materials purchased online. After dozens of attempts, he could create convincing replica that would pass casual inspection. For the cash replacement, Eddie cut newspapers to exact bundle dimensions and weights. Each bundle contained approximately $50,000 in mixed bills and weighed 1.2 pounds. Eddie prepared 212 fake bundles, enough to replace the entire shipment if necessary. Eddie purchased a heavy-duty duffel bag with internal compartments designed for travel. He lined the compartments with lead sheets to prevent electronic detection and added foam padding to prevent shifting. The bag could hold $4 million in cash while appearing to contain normal personal items. He acquired lock-picking tools and practiced on identical locks used for mail sacks. The locks were simple but effective against casual tampering. With the right tools and technique, Eddie could open and reseal them in under 3 minutes. Eddie also prepared a backup stash location at a decommissioned rail siding 15 miles from his route. The location was isolated, rarely visited, and had a buried freight container where he could hide the money if the plan went wrong. Eddie identified the optimal theft window between his 3rd and 4th delivery stops. At this point, he would be alone in the truck with no escort or immediate supervision. The route included a scheduled rest stop at a 24-hour truck plaza where he could work undetected. The plan was simple: arrive at the truck plaza, park in a secluded area, transfer the cash to his duffel bag, replace it with newspaper bundles, reseal the sacks with duplicate seals, and continue the route normally. Eddie calculated he needed exactly 18 minutes to process all 10 sacks. The scheduled rest stop lasted 20 minutes, giving him a small margin for error. After completing the route, Eddie would return to the post office and clock out normally. Later that day, he would retrieve the duffel bag from his truck and transport the cash to the rail siding stash location. Over the following weeks, Eddie would gradually convert the cash through a network of pawn shops, currency exchanges, and offshore transfers. His ex-military background included contacts who could move large amounts of cash discreetly. The long-term plan involved relocating with Miguel to rural Montana under assumed identities. Eddie had researched small ranch properties that could be purchased with cash. He would homeschool Miguel and live quietly until the investigation went cold. Eddie practiced every aspect of the plan until he could execute it flawlessly. He was ready. Eddie arrived for his Thursday night shift at 11:30 p.m. The cash run was scheduled to begin at midnight, giving him 30 minutes to complete final preparations. He checked his equipment: duffel bag hidden in the truck's rear compartment, lock-picking tools in his jacket pocket, duplicate seals in a small envelope, and newspaper bundles arranged in precise stacks. Everything was ready. Eddie reviewed the delivery manifest one final time. 10 bank branches, $10.6 million total, departure at 12:15 a.m. The largest single shipment was $1.8 million headed for First National Bank downtown. The smallest was $420,000 for a rural credit union. Every dollar was accounted for and tracked. At 11:45 p.m., Eddie approached Tommy Rodriguez in the maintenance bay. "Hey, Tommy, mind taking a look at my GPS? Been acting weird lately." Tommy nodded and pulled up the diagnostic computer. "No problem, Eddie. I'll run a full check. Take about 15 minutes." At midnight, Eddie began loading the cash sacks into his truck. Each sack was heavy, approximately 25 pounds, and required careful handling. The analog seals were intact, the serial numbers matched the manifest, and the documentation was complete. Supervisor Janet Walsh conducted her final inspection at 12:10 a.m. She verified the sack count, checked Eddie's paperwork, and confirmed the GPS tracking system was active. "Everything looks good, Eddie." Same route as always. Radio check-ins at 2 a.m., 4 a.m., and 6 a.m. "Any problems, call immediately." Eddie nodded and started the truck. At 12:15 a.m., he drove out of the loading dock and onto Route 27. The heist had begun. 12:15 a.m. Departure. Eddie followed his normal route through suburban Detroit toward the First Bank branch. The truck handled differently with $10.6 million in cash, but Eddie had accounted for the extra weight. The GPS tracker showed his location accurately, and the radio remained quiet. 1:45 a.m., first stop, Citizens Bank branch. 7, Eddie arrived at the first delivery location precisely on schedule. Security guard Robert Chen was waiting at the rear entrance with the receiving documentation. Eddie unlocked the appropriate sacks, verified the contents with Chen, and obtained the required signatures. The process took 12 minutes, exactly average for this location. "See you next week, Eddie," Chen said, loading the cash bundles onto a cart. "Same time, same place," Eddie replied, sealing the empty sacks and returning them to the truck. 2:30 a.m., second stop, Metro Credit Union. The second delivery proceeded identically. Security officer Linda Martinez verified the shipment and signed the manifest. Eddie maintained his professional demeanor while his heart rate increased. He was 90 minutes from the moment that would change his life forever. 3:15 a.m., radio check-in. Route 27 to dispatch. Second delivery complete, proceeding to rest stop. Copy Route 27, you're on schedule. Next check-in at 4 a.m. 3:22 a.m., Truck Plaza, rest stop. Eddie pulled into the Flying J Truck Plaza and parked in a dimly lit area behind the main building. The location was perfect, isolated but not suspicious, with easy access to his truck's rear compartment. Eddie activated his emergency flashers to indicate mechanical problems and raised the truck's hood to provide cover. Any observer would assume he was dealing with engine trouble. Working quickly but carefully, Eddie opened the rear compartment and retrieved his duffel bag. He unlocked the first cash sack, transferred the bundles to his bag, and replaced them with newspaper bundles cut to identical dimensions. The process took exactly 3 minutes and 40 seconds. Eddie repeated the procedure for all 10 sacks. The cash was heavier than expected, nearly 250 pounds total, but the duffel bag's reinforced design handled the weight. Each replacement bundle was positioned precisely to match the original arrangement. The duplicate seals were perfect replicas of the originals. Eddie had practiced this dozens of times, and his technique was flawless. The serial numbers matched the manifest, and the tamper-evident features appeared intact. 3:40 a.m., completion. Eddie sealed the final sack and loaded the duffel bag into a hidden compartment under the passenger seat. The entire theft had taken 18 minutes, exactly as planned. He lowered the hood, deactivated the flashers, and continued the route. 4 a.m., radio check-in. Route 27 to dispatch. Rest stop complete, proceeding to third delivery. Copy Route 27. Everything okay? You sound a little tired. Just the usual overnight routine. I'm good to go. 4:15 a.m., third stop, First National Bank downtown. Eddie delivered the largest shipment of the night, $1.8 million in newspaper bundles disguised as cash. Security supervisor Karen Thompson counted the bundles and verified the documentation. She noticed nothing unusual. "Big shipment tonight," Thompson commented, signing the manifest. "End of the month," Eddie replied casually. "Always heavier this time." Eddie continued his route, delivering newspaper bundles to 7 more bank branches. Each delivery proceeded normally. The security staff counted bundles, verified weights, and signed documentation. No one suspected that they were receiving worthless paper instead of cash. 6 a.m. Final radio check-in. Route 27 to dispatch. Route complete, returning to base. Copy Route 27. Good work tonight. See you Monday. 6:45 a.m. Return to post office. Eddie arrived at the loading dock and unloaded the empty sacks. Supervisor Janet Walsh reviewed his paperwork and confirmed all deliveries were completed successfully. Another smooth night, Eddie. Thanks for the good work. Eddie clocked out at 7 a.m. and walked to his Honda Civic. Hidden under the passenger seat of his mail truck was $10.6 million in cash. In 8 hours, bank employees would discover the theft. By then, Eddie planned to be far away. 7:30 a.m., Citizens Bank branch. 7 bank manager Sarah Lopez arrived for the morning opening and began processing the overnight cash delivery. She unlocked the first bundle and found newspaper cut into bill-size rectangles. Lopez initially assumed it was a packing error, but examination of additional bundles revealed the same problem. Lopez immediately called bank security, who contacted the post office and police. Within 30 minutes, all 10 bank branches had confirmed identical problems. Their cash deliveries contained only newspaper. 8:15 a.m. Post office investigation. Postal Inspector Marcus Webb launched an immediate investigation. He reviewed Eddie's delivery manifest, GPS tracking data, and radio communications. Everything appeared normal. Eddie had followed his assigned route, made all required check-ins, and completed deliveries on schedule. 8:45 a.m. Eddie's alibi. Detective Ray Collins contacted Eddie at his home to inform him of the theft. Eddie appeared shocked and concerned. He volunteered to cooperate fully with the investigation and provided detailed information about the night's events. "I can't believe this happened," Eddie told Collins. "I've been doing these runs for 5 years. Never had any problems." Eddie's story was consistent and credible. He had followed normal procedures, made all required deliveries, and noticed nothing suspicious. His GPS tracking data confirmed he had not deviated from the assigned route. 9:30 a.m., forensic analysis FBI agents examined Eddie's truck for evidence of tampering. They found no fingerprints beyond those of authorized personnel, no signs of forced entry, and no physical evidence of theft. The truck's GPS tracker showed no unusual stops or detours. The analog seals on the cash sacks appeared intact and undamaged. The serial numbers matched the original manifest. Forensic examination revealed they were sophisticated replicas, but this information was not immediately apparent. 10 a.m. Initial suspect list. Investigators compiled a list of potential suspects, including all postal employees with access to cash shipments. Eddie Morales was included, but was not considered a primary suspect due to his clean record and cooperative attitude. The investigation focused initially on external theft theories. Organized crime groups were known to target cash shipments, and the professional nature of the theft suggested sophisticated planning. 11 a.m. Media coverage. Local news stations reported the theft, describing it as one of the largest postal heists in Michigan history. The story attracted national attention, with headlines like, "Mail Truck Driver's $10 million Mystery." Eddie watched the coverage from his living room, maintaining his expression of shock and concern. He had successfully deflected suspicion while investigators pursued other leads. Over the following days, the FBI launched a comprehensive investigation into the mail truck theft. Agent Jennifer Park led the task force, which included postal inspectors, local police, and financial crime specialists. Forensic experts determined that the theft had occurred between 3:15 a.m. and 4:15 a.m., based on the timing of radio check-ins and delivery schedules. The Truck Plaza rest stop was identified as the most likely location for the theft. Security footage from the Truck Plaza showed Eddie's mail truck parked in the identified area for approximately 20 minutes. The footage was grainy and taken from a distance, but it appeared to show someone working under the truck's hood. This was consistent with Eddie's explanation of mechanical problems. The duplicate seals were analyzed by postal security experts, who determined they were high-quality replicas that would have required specialized knowledge and materials to create. The FBI began investigating sources for these materials. Agents examined the financial records of all postal employees with access to cash shipments. Eddie's records showed he was in severe financial distress due to medical bills and mortgage problems. This made him a person of interest, but many postal employees faced similar financial pressures. The FBI also investigated Eddie's personal background, including his military service and family situation. They discovered his son's medical condition and the associated costs, which provided a potential motive for theft. Investigators interviewed bank security personnel who had received the fake shipments. All reported that Eddie had appeared normal during deliveries and had followed standard procedures. None had noticed anything suspicious about his behavior or the shipments. Tommy Rodriguez, the night shift mechanic, was questioned about the GPS maintenance procedure. He confirmed that Eddie had requested a diagnostic check, but said this was routine and not unusual. The FBI reviewed thousands of hours of security footage from locations along Eddie's route. They found no evidence of accomplices, suspicious vehicles, or unusual activity. Eddie appeared to have acted alone. Eddie voluntarily submitted to multiple polygraph examinations. The results were inconclusive. Some responses suggested deception, while others indicated truthfulness. Polygraph results were not admissible in court, but they guided the investigation's focus. 3 weeks after the theft, investigators obtained search warrants for Eddie's home, vehicles, and storage facilities. They found no evidence of the stolen cash, sophisticated equipment, or materials used to create duplicate seals. Eddie had anticipated these searches and ensured that all incriminating evidence was removed or destroyed. His home appeared to be that of a struggling single father, not a successful thief. While investigators pursued leads, Eddie began the careful process of converting his stolen cash into legitimate assets. He had planned this phase as meticulously as the theft itself. Eddie divided the $10.6 million into smaller bundles and stored them in multiple locations throughout the Detroit area. He used abandoned buildings, storage units rented under false names, and buried containers in remote locations. Working gradually, Eddie converted small amounts of cash through legitimate businesses that accepted large cash transactions. He purchased used cars, expensive electronics, and luxury items that could be quickly resold for bank deposits. Eddie also utilized his military contacts to access informal currency exchange networks. Former soldiers often needed to convert foreign currency or move money internationally, and Eddie leveraged these relationships to process larger amounts. Eddie began traveling to other cities on weekends, claiming to visit Miguel at his ex-wife's house. Instead, he drove to Chicago, Cleveland, and Milwaukee to convert cash through pawn shops, currency exchanges, and private dealers. Each transaction was kept under $10,000 to avoid federal reporting requirements. Eddie maintained detailed records to ensure he didn't return to the same businesses too frequently. Eddie also purchased prepaid credit cards and gift cards that could be used for online transactions. These provided additional layers of separation between the stolen cash and his legitimate bank accounts. As the investigation continued, Eddie began converting his laundered money into investments and real estate. He purchased precious metals through coin dealers, bought shares in public companies through multiple brokerage accounts, and invested in cryptocurrency exchanges. Eddie was particularly interested in real estate opportunities in rural areas where cash purchases were common and documentation requirements were minimal. He identified several ranch properties in Montana that could be purchased without extensive background checks. Eddie began establishing a new identity for himself and Miguel. He contacted former military associates who specialize in document fraud and identity theft. For $50,000, he obtained authentic-looking birth certificates, social security cards, and driver's licenses under the names Edward Martinez and Michael Martinez. The new identities had complete backgrounds, including credit histories, employment, records, and educational transcripts. Eddie and Miguel could relocate anywhere in the country and live normal lives under their assumed names. Eddie also prepared explanations for his sudden wealth. His cover story involved inheriting money from a deceased relative and selling a successful small business. He created supporting documentation, including fake inheritance papers and business sale agreements. 6 months after the theft, the FBI investigation began losing momentum. Despite extensive efforts, investigators had found no physical evidence, no witnesses to the actual theft, and no trace of the stolen money. Eddie remained a person of interest, but was not charged due to lack of evidence. His financial situation had improved slightly. He claimed to have received a small inheritance from a deceased aunt, but not dramatically enough to suggest involvement in a million-dollar theft. True crime podcasts and television shows covered the mail truck heist extensively, but public interest gradually shifted to newer cases. Eddie was featured in several episodes, but was portrayed more as a witness than a suspect. The case became known as the ghost driver, due to the mysterious nature of the theft and the lack of evidence against any specific individual. Amateur investigators debated theories online, but none uncovered new evidence. The FBI task force was reduced to a single agent who monitored the case part-time. New crimes demanded attention, and the mail truck theft was classified as a cold case after 1 year. Agent Jennifer Park continued to review the file occasionally, convinced that Eddie was responsible but unable to prove it. She maintained contacts with informants and monitored Eddie's activities, but found no evidence of criminal behavior. Eddie continued working for the post office throughout the investigation. He was temporarily reassigned to non-cash routes, but eventually returned to regular duties when no charges were filed. His colleagues gradually stopped discussing the case around him. Eddie maintained his reputation as a reliable employee and caring father. His financial situation improved modestly, which he attributed to better money management and the small inheritance. Eddie's son Miguel successfully completed his chemotherapy treatment and entered remission. The medical bills continued to strain Eddie's finances, but he managed to stay current on payments through careful budgeting and the alleged inheritance money. Eddie's relationship with his ex-wife Carmen improved as his financial contributions became more consistent. She stopped pursuing increased alimony payments and began allowing Eddie more time with Miguel. 2 years after the theft, Eddie decided it was time to disappear. The investigation had stalled, public interest had faded, and he had successfully laundered most of the stolen money. Eddie submitted his resignation to the post office, citing health problems and a desire to spend more time with his son. Eddie purchased a 160-acre ranch in rural Montana using the identity Edward Martinez. The property included a modest house, several outbuildings, and enough land for cattle ranching. He paid $340,000 in cash, claiming it was from the sale of inherited property in Texas. The ranch was located near Whitefish, Montana, a small town with limited law enforcement presence and a transient population of seasonal workers and retirees. Eddie could blend in easily as another urban refugee seeking a simpler life. Eddie negotiated a custody modification with Carmen, claiming that Montana's clean air would benefit Miguel's recovery from leukemia. Carmen was initially resistant, but agreed when Eddie offered to pay for her nursing school education. The custody agreement allowed Eddie to take Miguel to Montana for extended visits during summer and winter breaks. Eventually, Eddie planned to gain full custody by demonstrating his improved financial stability and living situation. Eddie established High Country Security Consulting as his Montana business identity. He claimed to provide security assessments for rural businesses and ranches, leveraging his military background and postal service experience. The business was legitimate but minimal. Eddie occasionally provided basic security advice to local businesses, but his primary income came from his investments in hidden cash reserves. Before leaving Detroit, Eddie converted his remaining cash reserves into portable assets. He purchased diamond jewelry, collectible coins, and rare firearms that could be easily transported and sold if necessary. Eddie also transferred funds to offshore bank accounts in countries with strict privacy laws. He maintained access to over $6 million in various international financial institutions. Eddie and Miguel settled into their new life in Montana under their assumed identities. Local neighbors knew them as Edward Martinez, a former security consultant, and his son Michael, who was recovering from a serious illness. The ranch provided the perfect cover for Eddie's situation. Rural Montana was accustomed to people seeking privacy and new beginnings. Cash transactions were common, background checks were minimal, and law enforcement presence was limited. Eddie homeschooled Miguel using online curricula, claiming this was necessary due to his son's compromised immune system. Miguel thrived in the mountain environment, growing strong and healthy in the clean air and outdoor lifestyle. Eddie became an active member of the local community. He joined the volunteer fire department, participated in church activities, and sponsored a local youth baseball team. His military background and security expertise were valued by neighbors and local businesses. Eddie's story was compelling and believable. A single father who had sold his urban security business to provide a healthier environment for his recovering son. The inheritance explanation covered his ability to purchase the ranch with cash. Local law enforcement considered Eddie a responsible citizen who contributed to community safety. Sheriff's Deputy Maria Santos frequently consulted with Eddie about security issues at local businesses and events. High country security consulting grew slowly but steadily. Eddie provided legitimate services including security assessments, alarm system installation, and personal protection training. His clients included local banks, retail stores, and wealthy ranch owners. The business generated modest legitimate income while providing cover for Eddie's substantial hidden wealth. He maintained a modest lifestyle that was consistent with a small-town security consultant's earnings. Eddie carefully managed his hidden assets through a network of offshore accounts and domestic investments. He avoided any transactions that might trigger federal reporting requirements or unusual attention. His investment strategy focused on long-term growth rather than immediate income. Eddie purchased real estate in emerging markets, invested in technology stocks, and maintained substantial cash reserves in multiple currencies. Eddie's relationship with Miguel strengthened significantly during their time in Montana. Away from the stress of medical bills and custody battles, they developed a close bond based on outdoor activities and shared adventures. Miguel excelled academically and physically in his new environment. He learned hunting, fishing, and ranching skills while maintaining his studies through online programs. Miguel never suspected that his father's sudden wealth came from criminal activity. Eddie struggled with guilt about involving Miguel in his new identity, but he rationalized it as necessary to provide his son with the best possible life and medical care. The FBI periodically reviewed unsolved major crimes, and the mail truck theft case was selected for cold case analysis. New forensic techniques and database searches occasionally revealed evidence that was missed in original investigations. Agent Jennifer Park, now promoted to supervisory special agent, assigned the case to a junior agent for fresh perspective. Agent Michael Torres began reviewing the file with modern investigative tools and updated databases. Torres applied new digital forensic techniques to evidence from the original investigation. Enhanced analysis of security footage revealed previously unnoticed details about the timing and methodology of the theft. Computer analysis of the duplicate seals revealed they were created using specialized equipment that was available only from a limited number of suppliers. Torres began investigating purchases of this equipment in the months before the theft. Advanced financial analytics software allowed Torres to identify patterns in currency movements that weren't apparent to original investigators. He found evidence of systematic cash conversion activities in multiple cities throughout the Midwest. While this evidence didn't directly implicate Eddie, it supported the theory that the thief had used sophisticated money laundering techniques to convert the stolen cash. Torres used geographic profiling software to analyze the theft location and subsequent money laundering activities. The analysis suggested that the perpetrator had relocated to a rural area within 500 miles of Detroit. Montana was identified as a likely destination due to its privacy laws, cash-based economy, and limited law enforcement resources. Torres conducted comprehensive database searches for individuals matching Eddie Morales' profile who had relocated to target areas. He identified several potential matches, including Edward Martinez in Montana. The Martinez identity appeared authentic, but Torres noted the suspicious timing of the Montana relocation and the use of cash to purchase real estate. Agent Torres requested authorization to conduct limited surveillance of Edward Martinez in Montana. The request was approved based on the circumstantial evidence and the significance of the unsolved case. FBI agents established discreet surveillance of the Martinez ranch and monitored Eddie's activities in Whitefish. They observed his legitimate business operations and community involvement, but found no direct evidence of criminal activity. Torres contacted Sheriff's Deputy Maria Santos to gather intelligence about Edward Martinez. Santos described Martinez as a model citizen who contributed significantly to community safety and welfare. Santos mentioned Martinez's expertise in security matters and his military background, but she had no reason to suspect criminal activity. The information was consistent with Eddie's cover story. The FBI obtained court orders to examine Edward Martinez's financial records. They found evidence of substantial wealth that exceeded what would be expected from a small-town security consultant's income. However, Martinez's financial records showed apparent inheritance documentation and business sale proceeds that could explain his assets. The documentation was sophisticated enough to pass initial scrutiny. Torres used advanced facial recognition software to compare surveillance photos of Edward Martinez with FBI photos of Eddie Morales. The analysis suggested a possible match, but physical differences due to aging and lifestyle changes made confirmation difficult. Voice analysis of recorded phone conversations also suggested similarities, but the evidence was not conclusive enough for criminal charges. The FBI assigned an undercover agent to infiltrate the Whitefish community and gather intelligence about Edward Martinez. Agent Sarah Kim posed as a freelance journalist researching rural security issues. Kim conducted several interviews with Martinez under the pretense of writing an article about rural security consulting. Martinez was professional and knowledgeable, but provided no information that suggested criminal background. After 6 months of surveillance, the FBI had found no evidence that Edward Martinez was involved in criminal activity. His lifestyle was modest, his business was legitimate, and his community involvement was genuine. The investigation was complicated by the passage of time and Martinez's apparent complete transformation into a law-abiding citizen. Even if he was Eddie Morales, proving the connection would be extremely difficult. Agent Torres received a call from a Detroit-area estate sale company. They had acquired items from the estate of Eddie Morales' deceased neighbor and found documents that appeared relevant to the mail truck theft investigation. Among the items was a torn route manifest bearing Eddie's signature and a cryptic handwritten note. Delivery complete. New route begins tomorrow. E.M. For Miguel's future. The manifest was dated June 15, 2018, 5 days after Eddie's resignation from the post office and 2 weeks before his relocation to Montana. FBI forensic experts analyzed the manifest and confirmed it was authentic Postal Service documentation. The handwriting was compared to samples from Eddie's personnel file and showed strong similarities. The paper and ink were consistent with materials available at the post office during the time period in question. The document appeared to be Eddie's personal record of completing his final delivery, the theft itself. Federal prosecutors reviewed the new evidence and determined it was compelling but not sufficient for criminal charges. The manifest could be interpreted in multiple ways, and circumstantial evidence alone was unlikely to result in conviction. The statute of limitations for federal mail theft was approaching, and prosecutors were reluctant to pursue charges without stronger evidence of guilt. Agent Torres decided to approach Edward Martinez directly in Montana. He traveled to Whitefish and requested a voluntary interview at the local sheriff's office. Martinez appeared surprised but cooperative when Torres presented himself as investigating the 2018 mail truck theft. Martinez maintained his identity as Edward Martinez and denied any knowledge of Eddie Morales or the Detroit Postal Service. Torres presented the manifest evidence and explained the FBI's theory about Martinez's true identity. Martinez listened calmly and then requested to speak with an attorney before answering further questions. Martinez hired Helena attorney Robert Chen, who specialized in federal criminal defense. Chen advised Martinez to exercise his Fifth Amendment rights and decline further cooperation with the investigation. Chen also pointed out the weaknesses in the FBI's case: no physical evidence, no eyewitness testimony, and only circumstantial connections between Martinez and the original crime. After consulting with federal prosecutors, Agent Torres officially closed the active investigation into the mail truck theft. The case remained technically open, but was reclassified as inactive due to lack of evidence. Torres concluded that while Edward Martinez was likely Eddie Morales, proving this connection beyond reasonable doubt would be impossible given the passage of time and sophistication of the identity change. The FBI file noted that the subject had potentially established a new life and was not currently engaged in criminal activity. Further investigation was not considered a priority given limited resources and other active cases. Edward Martinez continues to operate his ranch in Montana with his son Michael, now a teenager excelling in academics and athletics. The local community regards them as valued residents who contribute positively to the area. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one.